So today I thought I would show you something that I actually do myself quite often, and that's making my own tiled textures from images that I get off of the internet. You can keep them as photorealistic, or we can also use filters in Photoshop to give them more of a hand-painted look. And once we've done that, we can bring them into Substance Designer and start using them whether we make, it doesn't matter, we can make procedural materials with them or we can just use them in straight PBR materials. But this is something that I do myself quite a lot, uh, simply because you can get some really nice textures, whether you take your own photographs or whether you pull stuff off the internet. The key to getting good results is to make sure that you come into your tools here and make sure that you're picking something with a high enough resolution, so either 2MP or 4MP, that's going to give you enough picture information that you can actually use it to make a nice tiled texture. I decided I liked these two stones. You can pick whatever you want because the methods are going to be exactly the same, but I kind of like the idea of this kind of licheny stuff happening on top. And they're not exactly the same color, but that's okay because I like this one because it's got some color to it, and this one I like, it's got these variations and cracks that we can also use to make our texture more interesting. Like I said, the key is to make sure that the images are the correct size. We're not worrying about copyrights because by the time we're done with these things, they're not going to look anything like what we started with. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to save my image as, and I've already saved these two. So you can go ahead and pick either these two or go ahead and pick some other two other images, and we're going to bring these into Photoshop and we're going to start fooling around with them there. So let's get into Photoshop. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new document, and I'm going to make this document, I'm going to do a 2040, I can't talk, and I'm going to make a 2K map. A little trouble talking and typing today, making sure the resolution is 72 dpi, and we'll go ahead and make that. So this is now absolutely the right size for a 2K map. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up those two images that I got off the internet, and I'm going to Control A, Control C. I'm going to copy them and paste them into here. Or another thing you can do, you can also pull this out. It's a little less convenient, but you can also drag and drop that in as well. I'm just going to go ahead and close that because we don't really need these guys anymore. So now we have these two images, and we need to turn them into a tiled map because right now they're not tiled. If we went ahead and used this as a tiled material, we would end up with seams at either end because what's happening over here has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening over there. So there's two things we need to do. First, we want to pick out we want to get the general look of the stone. I like this one for its overall look. I think it's a lot more interesting. I just pressed V, and that's going to allow me to move this around. I just think it's more interesting as an image. But I've got a lot of image here, and I'm going to try to get some of the most interesting bits into my frame that I'm going to be using. Again, I could, excuse me, I could just copy, but what I actually want to move is over on the other outside of my field of view right now. So I'm going to click on my layer here. I'm Alt and drag it up while hitting the Alt button will actually make a copy for me of that entire layer. And now I like this crack business here. I like that. So I've put that also into my frame, and now I'm going to start to work on this image. You can, for right now, I'm going to just use the eraser because I'm just doing the basics. Later on, I'm probably going to use a layer mask, so that'll allow me to sort of undo things a lot easier. I'm also going to create a scattering on my brush because I don't want a straight line. I want to start using a scatter, and I'm going to change my softness. I should have done that first. Then come back in here and sort of drag that down a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm also going to make it bigger. I just want something that will allow me to do this without having a straight edge. And I'm going to start to combine these two images together, and I'm going to get rid of the lines that I can see. So, and just come in here and you start working on the image and sort of keeping the things that you like. You can also use your cloning tool to, start adding things as well. I'm still going to subtract here though. So I'm going to go back to my eraser brush, and I'm going to get some more of that image in here. I want that sort of white lichen-y stuff. That looks pretty good. Then I'm going to come back to this other image I have and start to combine that. Again, I'm clicking on the layer itself, I'm hitting the V, and that's going to let me move this around a little bit. I'm trying to decide where. I think I want these stripy bits in here. I'm going to kind of very delicately overlay them. And now I am going to use a layer mask because I'm not entirely sure of what I'm doing here, and rather than erasing, I'm going to use a layer mask, and this works on a principle of black. You're actually using a brush to do this, and you're essentially painting alpha values on here. So if I'm painting with a black, I'm erasing. If I click X and switch my foreground to white, I'll be adding. So I can use my layer mask. Again, I think I'm going to put some scattering on this. Yeah, like that. And then I'm going to come back into my brush and soften up my edges a little bit. So again, now I'm just kind of getting rid, I'm going to be getting rid of most of this one, but I'm not entirely sure how and where, which is really why I'm using, because I'm really only interested in picking up a little bit of this color, because I actually like the design of the other one much better, but it just seemed kind of black and white to me, so I just really wanted to just pick up a little color with this one. And once we've done that, I think we'll also take a look. Now, notice how this is highlighted here on the layer mask. I want to make sure that I'm highlighting my actual layer before I start fooling around with my blends. But I'm going to see, yeah, you see that's giving it a bit more richness. It's giving it I mean, it's rock, so it's not like we're going super high color on it. And now that I've got this set up, I can come back into my layer mask, and I'm going to click X to switch to white, and now I'm going to start adding stuff. So I can start adding bits back once I can see how it's working with my layer mask. Now it looks, I'm pretty happy with that. Right. So I'm not so happy with it that I'm not entirely, that I'm 100% convinced that this is going to be my final. Whenever I'm in a situation like that, what I end up doing is I'm going to pick up all of these. I'm hitting Alt, I'm dragging them up. I've copied all of them, and now I'm just going to merge my layers. So this layer now on top is representative of what's going on here. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these guys into a group, and I'm going to hide it. So if 50 steps down the road I decided I really didn't like what was happening here, at least I've got my original set up here, and I can go back, not to the beginning, but back to the image that I decided that I liked. Right. I'm going to crop my image now, because right now, let's before we crop it, if we want to start working on the edges here to make this seamless, we need to bring these edges into the middle where we can work on them. And once we bring those edges into the middle where we can see what's going on, we can then get them to be seamless. And the way we do that is we go into Filter, Other, and Offset. And this allows you to offset your image on the X and the Y values. I'm going to offset it by 1024, both on the X and the Y. And that is going to, because it's a 2K map, so whatever size map you have, if you offset it by half of that amount, it's going to bring those edges into the middle. What we're seeing here is not clean edges, and that's because we didn't crop our image before we started doing this, and that's kind of why I wanted to show you. It's when it does an offset, it's offsetting the layers. So even if you don't see it, it's counting that into the offset. If you want to get those clean layers and have a seamless tile texture before you do any of that, it's really important to crop your image. So the easiest way to do that is you highlight, Control A to pick up everything, Image, and Crop. And now if we go back into our filter, Other, Offset, it's giving us these nice clean edges that we're going to be able to work with. Now before we do that, I'm going to make a copy. Again, I'm hitting Alt and dragging it up. And I'm going to do it to the copy, because that will give me extra options as far as what I can fix and change in there. So Filter, Other, Offset, and we're going to click OK. So we have our original underneath, and we have the same image with the edges offset on top. And now I'm going to add a layer mask. So I can start doing one of two things here. I want to get rid of these lines here in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. So that can either be, again, if I'm doing a layer mask, I want to subtract now. So I can either start to subtract stuff, but sometimes you end up losing things when you do that. I can also, I'm going to click on that, and now I'm going to hit my clone tool. I can also clone. So with a combination of cloning and using my layer mask to subtract, thinking that I'm gonna do this, that I can actually go ahead, oops, I'm still got my clone tool. What I was doing was just cloning where it works, it's just working on black and white, so it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. And this is where this one comes in, because what I can also do is I'm going to come in here. I want to copy something from this one. I'm going to get my lasso tool. I'm going to copy from this old layer. So Control C, Control V, and I can kind of move this around, and then also incorporate that, I'll put it up here, into what I'm doing as well. And now I'm going to, again, I think I'm just going to use a layer mask for that. Go back into my brush tool, maybe make it a little bit smaller, and sort of incorporate that into my image. Now what I'm doing, you'll notice that I'm really trying to stay away from these edges, because while we've offset it, we have created a new set of seams on the sides. So we know that if we don't touch the actual edge, I mean, I'll come as close as I possibly can to this edge, but I'm very careful the way I work around these edges, because I don't want to create a bunch of new seams. So I think that one's been incorporated quite well. I'm going to come back to this one, go into my layer mask, and I'm going to start getting rid of some of this as well. Now I really like this crack, so I think I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to again get my lasso tool, and I'm going to, oops, just pick up this guy and see whether we can't enhance that a little bit. So again, I'm copying. I'm going to turn these guys back on. I'm going to paste him, and we can, we're not going to make it exactly the same because that would look stupid. And now remember that that's the end of it coming out there. So I want to do something a little bit interesting, and maybe just kind of incorporate it like this. And because I don't want to start repeating designs too much, so I'm just kind of taking just one part of this that I'm going to add into it, but I don't want to add too much of it back in, because that's going to start giving me like a pattern design. So again, I'm coming into the layer mask, and I'm just kind of messing with it a little bit and adding a little bit more information without adding so much that I run the risk of adding patterns in there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to come back down here, and I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. And I'm subtracting. Yeah, you see, I'm happier with that. And going to get rid of this one. Again, I'm being very, very careful on that edge. Actually, here I think I want to add. So, you see, but it's going to, well, we've taken some out here. We're going to have to add into that layer mask, but for now I'm just going to add some, I'm putting a scatter on that cloning brush. And I'm also going to soften the edges a little bit. With the clone brush, if your edges are too soft, you kind of get this some mushiness, so that's, you kind of have to finesse that a little bit. I can come back in here. I'm going to switch to my brush. Yeah, I didn't want it all, there was a lot of gray on this side and a lot of white on this side. I kind of wanted to have it spill over a little bit. So that looks okay now. I think that looks like a pretty nice piece of stone, at least to start with. And so what we're going to do is we now combine all of these into one layer. And again, I want to hang on to this original one, so I'm just going to make another copy, because you'll see that if we turn that off, these are the places that we actually erased out. So we actually do want to combine that with the one underneath it. And now if we go into filter offset again, we're back to our original, and we now have a seamless texture because we can actually see that this is how they're going to join. So what you're doing here is actually working, you can think of it working on four corners, which all in all incorporate your seamless texture. So this is what the seam would look like at four corners of the texture, and I think that's pretty good. So we're now done with just building the actual color mask. But we're in Photoshop now, and we're going to have to kind of, between Photoshop and Substance, finesse our heights from what we're getting in this photograph. And we'll kind of get into that in the next video. There's no one way to do it. Because you're dealing with photographs and because each image is different, you kind of have to do this by the seat of your pants. And because, for example, in this particular case, it's easier because the dark areas in here are actually deeper. So that corresponds, for example, to a height mask. So it would be relatively simple with this image that we have here to turn it into a grayscale, and our heights are more or less corresponding to the colors that we have. So this is a relatively simple image to work. You can get a lot more tricky with it because you could have an image, for example, where the color for the high areas, if the color for the high areas is black or some other dark color, your height maps are not going to correspond on a more or less one-to-one basis with what your colors are doing. And that's where you have to kind of, on a case-by-case basis, use whatever technique you need to use to get the various maps that you need. So with that being said, we're going to try to hit as many of the possible techniques in the next video, even if we don't particularly need it with this image, just to show you. So you have kind of this toolkit of things that you can do to the various images that you pull off of the internet and start making your own. So I'll see you in the next video.